Hey guys, PIEGUYRULZ here, and welcome to the very last Gravity Falls TV log, because this is for the two-part finale, Weirdmageddon Part 3. There's major spoilers here, duh. Um, so yes, Gravity Falls. It's it's been such a crazy ride, and there were so many episodes where things got really crazy, and I talked about this a bit when I talk about A Tale of Two Stands and Not What He Seems. In those episodes being great because it's very rare that a mystery series that has a lot of buildup actually has a satisfying payoff. And so, much like with those episodes, which I think it worked great. I think the mystery of who the author was resolved brilliantly there. Um, Much like there was a lot riding on this finale to explain, a lot of the lingering threads of the series and tie it all together and kind of, you know, the episodes like Dipper and Mabel versus the Future, episodes like A Tale of Two Stands, even like parts of the last Mabel Corn, really kind of built this up, and so it did need to live up to relatively high standards. And after what happened with Weirdmageddon Part 2, and you can see my TV log on that if you want to know my feelings of that, I was a little bit worried about what was going to happen with Part 3. I was relatively confident we'd get a satisfying conclusion, but I was a little worried that things might be rushed, or that certain things weren't going to be explored, and to an extent, my fears were correct, in that there are things that there is at least one thing that I wanted to see in this finale that kind of was a lingering thread that didn't get resolved. And there were parts of this that were kind of predictable and straightforward. But, and I will get into those, but I have to say that as a whole, I did enjoy this finale. I think it was a very satisfying finale. I think it is a solid, good finale. Um, of all the ways to end the series, I think this is a one that definitely makes me happy. So yeah, so let me first talk about the negatives in that. Firstly, I was a bit disappointed that nobody ever called Mabel out. Nobody called Mabel out. In fact, Stan is blaming Ford for the portal and like everything happening, and Mabel has a lot of blame as well. Like, Ford built the portal in the first place. Ford made his original deal with Bill. Of course, he is the one ultimately responsible for everything that comes after that. But part of it is Stan's fault for reactivating the portal, which again, he was righteous in trying to save his brother, but that was very dangerous, and he has part of the blame. And Mabel has a lot of the blame, or at least, you know, I don't even want to say that it's necessarily even Mabel's like fault, but Mabel was directly involved in it, and nobody tells her this. She doesn't even know. Mabel asks how did this happen? And like, or does Mabel ask that, or does Stan ask that? I don't know. One of them asks like, how does this happen? And like, Mabel is the one that made it happen. Nobody addresses it. Nobody addressed it in the last episode either. Nobody told Mabel, and this was part of the problem with the last one, is like nobody told Mabel this is her fault in a way. And it would have just been nice to have some conversation about that, seeing as how much of a big deal that is. Again, I'm not saying that it's all her fault. I'm not saying that she needs to be like, punished or anything like that, but like just a little bit of discussion. I mean, she directly led to the apocalypse, and there's no discussion. The blame is placed on Ford. When I think it's a situation where pretty much every member of the Pines family is at fault for what happened to an extent. So I was a little bit upset that we didn't get any sort of resolution to that. We did get resolution with Dipper and Mabel, becoming friendly again in part 2, but we didn't get any sort of resolution to that. And then in terms of predictability, there were parts of this that were predictable. The twin switch thing I saw coming. The whole twin switching thing is like such a cliche trope that I'm kind of surprised they didn't use it on Gravity Falls at this point. They did have the one episode where they switched minds, Dipper and Mabel, but they never tried to like fool anyone by doing a twin switch. Outside of the accidental time. And in fact, I was kind of hoping that they would do that switch. They would, like, I don't know, maybe Stan has a piece of the carpet on him or something, or Ford, one of them just happens to have it, and they actually switch brains. Like, that would have been cool. Not, it was all right. It was a pretty good con. It didn't seem, bad, but it was a tad predictable. And there were a few other parts of this that were just kind of like, okay, this kind of has to happen this way. There weren't, in this episode, there weren't very many, like, giant bombs, giant rocks being thrown in there. It was all relatively straightforward. You knew the characters had to go in, they had to rescue Ford, they had to defeat Bill, and they all band together and they make the robot. The robot, I'm not saying was predictable, but they all banded together and did this, and it is straightforward in that way. And this isn't an awful thing. I'm not saying that it being predictable like ruins it or anything. But it isn't, this finale isn't going to be a mind-blowing, like, what did I just watch finale. Like, you might be expecting Gravity Falls to do, because it's Gravity Falls. There's been endings to episodes where things are kind of like, what just happened? And okay, so those are just kind of like the two big negative things that I do have to say about it. But I do think as a whole, this was a very solid, good episode. And I think that a part of the predictability of it has to do with the fact that this is, when you break it down, this is a Disney ending. In fact, this whole special feels like a Disney movie, right? There's moments where things get intentionally very dark. Like, there's literally a line where Bill says, I have to go turn some children into corpses. Like, that's literally a line said on Disney XD. And that's something that in, like, Disney movies, there are dark lines like that. They're just thrown in there. You have those dark moments, but it's all okay because in the end, everyone lives, everyone gets a happy ending, except for Bill himself. But everyone else, aside from Bill and his minions, gets a happy ending. Gideon gets a happy ending. Pacifica gets somewhat of a happy ending, I suppose. Yeah, and that's okay. You know what? As much as it would have been cool if there was some sort of, like, really crazy off-the-wall finale, where, like, giant twists were thrown in left and right, I'm okay, and I'm happy with a finale that wraps everything up nicely, gives us happy characters at the end of the day, puts our characters through some stuff, it delivered on everything. It just kind of, like, hits all the boxes, and that's great. That's fine. I'm not knocking it in any way, for that. So, and because of that, I was very happy with it. We do get one of the things that I really wanted to see outside of people, calling Mabel out, was Stan and Ford talking it out, finally getting that confrontation, because we went the whole back half of season 2 with Stan and Ford, like, refusing to talk to each other. And in fact, like, most episodes split them up, so they weren't both in the same episode. Like, one would have a very small part in the episode, and the other one would kind of take over. There's a hair on my hat. I got it. Right, so I finally, it was like one of those things like, all right, they, please tell me they're gonna have some kind of, like, discussion with each other at the end, and they did. They had a very big one, and in fact, that's one of the more interesting things about this finale is that Stan himself starts off in a very curmudgeon-y place. Like, he starts off in a pretty rowdy place, not wanting to go along with the plan. He doesn't want to save Ford, but even beyond, it goes beyond him not wanting to save Ford. He doesn't want to, like, participate and, like, risk his neck or even leave the shack. He's just, like, he's given up. He's just resigned. He's like, I'm done. Which is kind of sad, because if that's the attitude he had when Dipper and Mabel were still out there somewhere, and his attitude was like, well, we're safe in the shack, that's kind of sad. But I guess you're not supposed to think about that. But anyway, yeah, he was almost uncharacteristically nasty towards the beginning of this, but you kind of see where he's coming from. He thinks he's being reasonable, and he does have a point about Ford not saying thank you. And even though, yes, him not holding hands with Ford and everyone and completing the circle, it is like a total what are you doing, Stan moment. Even though that is like a big, like, what is wrong with you? You do kind of understand why he has the grudge with Ford, and um the show calls him out for it. And the show, is like, the show itself is like, what are you doing? And he does redeem himself. He puts himself in a position where he might have been sacrificed. Which, and again, it doesn't, nothing ends up coming of it. He loses his memories for, a hot New York second, but he did put himself in a place where he could have potentially lost everything. So he does make up for that in a way. Let me just check my notes to see what else I have here. Oh yeah, we got to see almost every character in here. There were a few that were like oddly missing, like Blendon, but to be fair, Blendon was pretty prominently featured in the first part of Weirdmageddon. And in fact, I think if you count all three parts of Weirdmageddon together, you probably have almost every character outside of like very few, like Mermando and I don't know, the creepy puppet Gabe. Although he might have even had an appearance in like on like a poster, or probably, actually, I think he does appear in the background. But between like the first part where you get a lot of shots of like all the characters, all like the townsfolk, the second part where you get like all the TV show characters and fictional characters within Gravity Falls were in Mabel's bubble, and the third part where we do see more prominent characters. You do get a nice mix of all the characters, pretty much all the major ones throughout the three parts. Several times even, the members of several times are even in this one. So yeah. I mean, to be fair, they did get everyone. Yeah. So overall, I am very happy with this. I do think there are a few problems. And in addition to the ones that I said, another problem would be that Bill's kind of plan and like what he is and everything. It never really evolved too much. We didn't really, like, he started going into a little bit about how he was a two-dimensional creature that broke his way into the three-dimensional world, and now he's trying to break Earth into the four-dimensional world. Which, like, that's an interesting thought. If you know anything about the way dimensions work, that is an interesting thought, but it's never really given too much beyond then we'll throw a bigger party there. Like, it doesn't, it's not, nothing is made of it. We don't really know why he'd even want to do that when he can just throw a party in the third dimension. um I mean, I guess in the end of the day, his MO was just be crazy, be weird, throw party. Which is fine, but in terms of like a final boss villain, there maybe should have been a little bit more to him than that. Um but yeah, I mean, there are those problems in there, but like I said, because it is like that Disney ending where it just, you don't really think too hard about certain things like that when you're watching it, because it's a fun, enjoyable ride. There's a lot of really cool stuff in here, like the giant robot they build. Like, they build a giant robot out of the Mystery Shack. Like, what? Like, that's awesome. I kind of expected them to make the shack mobile, but like, how insane they go with the design of this thing, where it's they take a part of the T-Rex that was frozen in amber, and they make it a part of the robot. Like, what? That's so cool. And then we finally get to know what the cipher is and what it does and everything. And what's cool about it, even more than that, is that it doesn't work. Like, that's cool. It's cool when stories have these kind of false, like, characters try something and fail. That's something you don't see enough on TV shows, because I guess if you do it wrong, then it feels like you just wasted a bunch of time with the characters trying something. But if you do it in an interesting way, then it makes things feel even more desperate, because this was like the one plan. This was the one weakness of Bill. This is how you defeat him, and they couldn't do it. Like, that was a moment that really was like, oh man, like, things are in trouble now. Um, so yes, so that's what I have to say about the Weirdmageddon finale. There are other things that I would like to talk about, but you know, I want to watch the finale a few more times and get my thoughts together and stuff because it was an hour long. There's a lot in there. And in fact, you know, the show itself, it's so dense and it's so good and there's so many good parts in it and I don't want it to be over. And you know, because now it is over after the long wait. It is over and we have the entire series of Gravity Falls. I think it would be interesting to maybe take a look back at the whole series in a way. Like, I don't know, cover every episode in some kind of fashion. I'm not quite sure how one would do such a thing, but if I come up with any idea of covering, like, I don't know, I could break it up into seasons and talk about the first season. I mean, it's only 20 episodes, so it wouldn't take me as long as like SpongeBob. So maybe I should do every episode of Gravity Falls reviewed. I don't know. But let me know what you guys think about that idea and about the finale. So, Pie Guy Rules, out.